Hello and welcome to another show. I'm Dr. Cutter, the Curist, and I have to ask you the question, how well are you? We want you to take care of yourself, whether it's the holidays, different times of the year, season changing. Make sure that you focus on your health. Now, a topic that's really become very current these days is food allergies. I mean, my goodness, it seems like everybody has one. And in fact, if you look at some of the world's statistics, it's estimated that between 250 and 520 million have some type of a food allergy. I always think, is this something that is new, or are we just kind of discovering it more? So I brought two guests today to help us investigate this topic and really look into it. We have two very prominent allergists from Los Angeles, Dr. Johnson as well as Dr. Staveren. These two are very well acquainted with each other because one trained the other, and we're going to let you guess which is which. And I've actually interacted with them in the hospital as well as in physician organizations. So I'm very excited that they're here today, and I can't wait to talk about this topic. Ladies, welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So it's the holidays, right? This is what I'm envisioning for the holidays. I mean, here's everybody, 30 people sitting around a giant table or distributed around the living room, kitchen, everything. Everyone's eating and all that. And all of a sudden, somebody breaks out with some allergy. So what is it that people can do if that type of thing happens?
Well, I think the first thing is to be prepared. The hostess should ask people if they have any food limitations, and if someone has an allergy, they need to take the responsibility to let the hostess know, or host know, that there's an issue and they can't be around that kind of food. Some people are so sensitive that they can't smell the food, so you really need to find out in detail, how severe their allergy is.
Now, what do you mean they can't smell the food?
Well, there are people that if they smell a food cooking, they start having allergy symptoms.
Particularly fish. Some people with peanut, but fish oils are a big problem for some people, and that will send them into a significant reaction.
Just smelling it itself.
Just smelling it from being cooked.
Now that's kind of interesting because I think most people think you have to consume it, right? But
Most
it's really
people
just
it has to be consumed, but
there are some
are
people
very sensitive.
But they would know that, right? These are people that really, in general, are going to know that they have this sensitivity. Now, I did a little reading and I found that the most common allergies are milk, eggs, peanuts, tree nuts, which I'm always like, what is a tree nut? It's not something that, I'm going to go to the store and buy tree nuts. Wheat, soy, fish, and crustacean shellfish, right? Does that sound about right?
Yes, sounds about
What
right.
are tree nuts? Do you know anything about the tree
It's not
nuts?
a peanut and it's a nut. It's a tree nut.
So it's just a nut that grows on the
Almonds,
trees.
walnuts,
Right.
pecans. They all grow on trees.
Yeah.
And pecans actually are more like peas. Peanuts are more like peas. They're not on trees. They're grown from the ground.
Ground nut.
They're ground nuts.
Like on a vine. Is it on a vine like grapes or?
More like, I would say, on a vine, peas, like
Okay.
the peas in terms of the ground. So they're not in the tree, and so we differentiate between a tree nut and the peanut.
Dr. Staveren is assuming that I am familiar with a farm, so she's saying you know how peas grow, and I'm sitting here like I don't. So this is all, we all have to look this up, okay? Commit to me that you're going to go online and look up this whole tree nut thing and see how peanuts grow, and It always makes me think of Carver, who
Yes.
did he was such an
George
inventor and
Washington
everything.
Carver, yeah.
So that's a little history for everybody, okay.
But the thing is that allergy-wise, some people will be allergic to peanut and not to other kinds of nuts, and some people will be allergic to other nuts and not to peanuts. So
They're totally different families with regards to allergies, so it's not automatic.
So then how do you differentiate? I mean, how does a person know they have, peanut butter and they have a reaction, let's say, I don't know, they're 3 or 4 years old. I don't even know the age. So what age typically do people present with the allergy symptoms? Like when is the initial episode?
Well, a lot of times babies will present with eczema, and it may be to their formula. So that could be 5 months old or something like that. And then as they start eating other things, they can develop allergies to other things.
And it peaks around 1 to 2 years of age.
Really?
And it may be up to maybe 6 to 8% of that age group. But the good news for children is they, usually they will, quote unquote, outgrow this allergy. That allergy
I
will
see.
go away with time. And so the overall probably allergy for children probably drops to around 3 or 4%, would you say, roughly around that time.
Yeah.
However, if you think that allergies have increased with regards to food allergies, they have slightly increased in children from 1999 being roughly 3.4, 3.5%, and it's eked up around 2011 to approximately 5%. So there has been a slight increase in food allergy, particularly in children. Adults, we'll talk about adults.
And it also
Yeah.
lately it's taken longer to outgrow the food allergy.
Really?
They outgrow it a little later.
I read a statistic that it's 1 in 26 in a classroom basically has a food allergy. So there's likely to be 2 kids in every classroom, if you have a large class size, that has some type of a food allergy. Does that sound about right? Somewhere around there, it was 1 in
Sounds
26
a little
is
high,
what I read.
but I guess it depends on what age group you're talking about.
Yeah.
Because the older you get, the less likely that the child will have the allergy.
Because
if
they
you're-
outgrow it.
Right. I
Okay.
would say probably maybe a kindergarten class or less.
Because adults, their food allergy prevalence isn't as high. Not as many adults have food allergies as
I
kids.
see.
Maybe 2% of adults.
But then why does everybody seem to, you have a dinner party now, right? You invite 10 people to your house and, somebody, I don't eat nuts and this one and no gluten and this and that, what's going on there? It just seems so prevalent.
This is Dr. Johnson's expertise
Well,
with
I don't know
regards
about
to this.
expertise,
But
but,
she's
one
very
thing
good at this.
is that you need to allergists need to distinguish between food allergy and food sensitivity.
Thank you.
Like some
Yes.
people will be sensitive to a food, but it's not actually an allergy.
Right.
When we talk about allergy, we're talking about an allergy antibody that's sitting on the allergy reactive cell and kind of waiting for a little piece of protein of something you're allergic to come along.
Okay.
So the piece of protein attaches to the antibody, and the other end of the antibody triggers a cell to release histamine. So if it happens in your nose, you get sneezy, itchy nose, happens in your lungs, you can wheeze, you eat something you're allergic to, you can have intestinal problems or rashes, sometimes systemic, worse systemic problems. A typical example of a non-allergic food sensitivity is lactose intolerance.
Yes.
So you're missing the enzyme that digests the milk sugar. The person drinks the milk sugar, the lactose, doesn't get properly digested. It passes into the intestine where the bacteria works on it and causes gas and diarrhea. And that we're not going to pick up with an allergy test.
Now, there's certain ethnic groups that have a predilection to a lactose intolerance. Is that correct?
Yeah, it tends to be groups where milk hasn't historically been a part of their diet
Okay.
over the hundreds or millennia.
So then what groups would those be? Could you characterize it? Is it, certain ethnicities or races or from a certain region of the world, or is it just the habits
Well, actually,
that you're talking
when
about?
I was in college, I had a physician who was a teacher and he at the college, and he had done a study in Africa where he tried to see who was lactose intolerant and who wasn't. And for example, the Fulani, who are herding societies, they didn't have lactose intolerance. They were able to tolerate milk. But other tribes that didn't have herding as part of their history and culture, they did have lactose intolerance. So you could kind of look around the world and look at the different kinds of foods where you don't see milk in the foods, and it's likely that you would find more lactose intolerance among those groups.
That's like a little pseudo advertisement for, DNA testing, right? Everyone's doing, and you can actually give a DNA test for a holiday gift. I mean, I think that's kind of interesting. This is where we've come to. 15, 20 years ago, DNA was such a, an inaccessible thing for the public. And now, there was an entrepreneur in Silicon Valley that just kind of put all of this together and didn't even have a medical background, just wanted everyone to have access. And that's where these companies come from.
Right.
So I think that's kind of an interesting aside. So we were talking a little bit about food intolerances and things like that. And so let's get back to the allergies. What does an allergic reaction look like?
So I'll let you go ahead with that.
They're so polite to each other. They want, let's share. I think that's great.
There can be a range of symptoms.
Okay.
And they can involve from the eyes, the nose, the throat, so that's itchy, watery eyes,
Okay.
runny nose, sneezing. You can also have itching inside the mouth, swelling of the lips, the tongue, the face. You can develop hives in the skin. You can also have respiratory problems or lung problems where you can't breathe and feel tight. You're wheezing, your heart rate may increase, and it can also affect your gut. You can have vomiting, you have diarrhea, you can have some queasiness in the stomach. And it can range from mild symptoms on to very significant life-threatening symptoms. And I think something we both want to emphasize, if you have a true food allergy and you've had significant symptoms in the past, it's something to be taken seriously, not only by you, by the caretaker, by your friends, by your parents. Believe it or not, probably one of the largest groups that have life-threatening problems and die are not only just school children, but adolescents and college kids. Because now they decide, well, they're not allergic to it anymore, or they don't want to appear embarrassing.
Denial, right? A little denial, you know.
And that's really a major problem for those who have true food allergy. Dr. Johnson actually she brought with her a little outline of symptoms and, you know, what you should do or how you should be concerned about it.
Okay, this is nice because it kind of goes through the symptoms and, you know, what to do. Just take us really quickly through the steps on here.
Okay, so if someone has just one mild symptom, they might be able to get away with taking some Benadryl. But if you have a serious symptom, or if you have two mild symptoms, you need to use the epinephrine. Epinephrine is the medication of choice for someone who's having anaphylaxis or a systemic allergic reaction.
And epinephrine is a generic name for the medication. It's not a specific drug. It's not a specific company. Epinephrine. And epinephrine is something that we make in the body, right? So this is just an analog that you can buy in the store so that you can, you know, utilize this in a situation like this. Okay, so take us through. So she said 2 mild symptoms or 1 serious symptom. Okay, what else do we have here?
So what you would do is you would use the epinephrine auto-injector. They have auto-injectors that are really easy to use now. You would take Benadryl and get the paramedics to take you to an emergency room.
Okay.
One of the problems is sometimes people will have an allergic reaction. They felt bad, they handle it, it goes away, and they think that they're fine. But there can sometimes be a late phase reaction that occurs 2 to 10 hours later.
Okay.
So after they have that initial reaction, they could potentially wake up in the middle of the night wheezing badly, or, you know, something bad is happening. And oftentimes steroid pills or steroid shot will prevent that. So if they go to the emergency room, they would likely get steroid pills or a steroid shot.
Okay. All right.
And the other thing is that the epinephrine lasts about 20 to 40 minutes. So when it wears off, sometimes the symptoms come back and you would want to be in the emergency room.
So how long do they keep you in the emergency room for a reaction, usually?
It depends on how well the patient does, how fast they stabilize.
But at least a couple of hours, right? So you go to the emergency department, you should expect to be there for a couple of hours. And, you know, if you feel like you're leaving a little bit earlier than that, you might want to stick around, you know, for another hour or so, just to make sure that you have the full time period, you know, to go through the symptoms and make sure that there's no late phase reaction, right?
Sometimes I'll give a patient epinephrine and the symptoms will come back as it wears off, and I need to give them another epinephrine shot. So, you know, they should stay long enough so that the doctor's clear that they've stabilized.
If a group of people or someone in their home or something like that wants to get one of those, this is a not-for-profit that offers these little diagrams?
Food Allergy Research and Education is a consumer organization, and they provide quite a bit of information about different food allergies. So that you can find this information online. They will send you the packet free. And it just has a lot of information about what you can do about, you know, food allergies, how you can educate yourself, dining out with food allergies.
That's a big one.
How to avoid cross-contact, cross-contamination. There's some kinds of restaurants where they'll use the same oil to fry foods. So, you know, they'll have an oil that doesn't pick up a lot of flavor. So they'll fry the shrimp dish in that, and then they'll take that out, and somebody has another dish, and you didn't order shrimp, but a little tiny piece of shrimp gets into your your food.
Right.
And if you're very exquisitely sensitive to that, it can cause you a big problem.
Now, it's interesting that you mentioned shrimp. Now, I'm going to have to divulge, some things about my past, right? But when I was in the 8th grade, I went to the Sadie Hawkins dance. I think I was in the 8th grade, 9th grade, I don't know. But anyway, I went to the Sadie Hawkins dance, and there's a long story as to why I went. I'm not going to tell you, but, I really didn't want to go. But a boy asked me, and then, long story short, he asked me to ask him. So I went with this guy. So we went to a major seafood restaurant for dinner. Now, I have had all of the seafood before, and I had the shrimp lover's platter, right? I eat the shrimp, we're having a good time, we go to the dance, I'm dancing, I'm having a good time, and my face feels warm and itchy. So I go to the bathroom, and I'm filled with hives, and you know how it is. I mean, I'm in high school. Maybe it wasn't 8th grade. I think it was probably 9th grade, sorry. But anyway, I was filled with hives, so I had him take me home immediately. I get home, I drink some water, I'm fine. And I've been eating shrimp ever since. I ate shrimp before and after. And I've always wondered, what happened? Why did I have that reaction that evening, so, dramatically? It was all over the place. I know I'm putting them on the spot because this is a mystery to me, okay? There may not be an answer, but this is my burning question about my health.
Well, it's really, this happened several times to us as well. And,
okay, good.
I mean, in terms of patients. But first of all, it's just very possible it wasn't the shrimp.
Ah,
it was something
that
else.
oil.
That's the first thing it may have been something else. You're associating it with the shrimp, but it could have been
interesting
something else and how it was prepared.
That's why we do allergy testing.
To see.
So we can figure out what it is.
Yeah, so you're associating
Wow.
with shrimp, but it might not have been shrimp at all. So
If somebody goes to a restaurant, I'll try to get them to bring all the ingredients that were in that dish so that we can test them for
I don't
it.
know, what did they fry it in, how it was prepared. Just a side note, how important this is in terms of being prepared and being cognizant of your allergies and some responsibility of the restaurant. Unfortunately, the beating of the young man at the Dodger Stadium, sounds we're not kind of going on track, but there was a witness, he died of food allergy before he could testify because he went into a restaurant. He did tell them that he was allergic. I don't know if it might have been shellfish. And apparently he probably was unfortunate accident with regards to one of these oils or one of these preparations. And he died and he was not able to testify in that particular case. So, as I really want to emphasize, it's a serious problem for those who have true food allergy.
So then what do you do in a restaurant? I mean, you go in, you inform them. I mean, is it just really kind of a crapshoot, or are there only certain things to
Some people
eat?
who have severe food allergies don't eat in a restaurant.
Right.
Interesting.
Or don't go to a seafood restaurant.
Yeah.
Particular, if I have a friend who has a fair amount of allergy, and she just won't go with us to certain shellfish places because more than likely she feels that it's coming out too quickly, it's coming out too fast. It's a large kind of restaurant, and she just doesn't trust it per se.
But if you go to a restaurant like that, can you have a salad? If it's, or that's probably not safe because
so
you're handling.
I want to give you an anecdote. the answer is probably.
Yeah.
Probably is okay, but do you want to take the
that chance?
Okay. So 2 things. One,
Okay.
I know of a restaurant where if you tell them you have food allergies, they'll send a chef out to talk to you.
Yes.
Wow.
And I would tell you what it was, but you say we're not supposed to plug anybody
We
on
can't
this
plug
show.
it, but everyone,
anyway.
there are restaurants that will cater to your needs, so just make sure you communicate, and if you want to call out the chef, see if they'll come out. Okay. So
I have an associate who went for a weekend away, and he knows he has a lot of allergies. He's very careful about what he orders. He ended up spending the evening in the emergency room because they had substituted the oil on the salad.
Oh my
They
goodness.
put walnut oil on the salad, and they didn't put it on the menu. And
That seems insane almost with all of these, nut allergies that they would do that.
And he had to go to the emergency room. It's just that some people don't really take allergies seriously.
Interesting.
So if you have, you really kind of have to take responsibility and not, make sure that, because it's your life.
Truly.
So if you're very allergic, I have another anecdote.
Go for it. Let's hear it.
There was my sister told me, she read this in like Dear Abby or something, but a woman wrote in because she'd gone to a party with her friends, and she asked the hostess, did the food have nuts? And the woman said, no, it didn't have nuts, go ahead and eat it. So another friend took her aside and said the food did have nuts and to not eat the snacks. So when she confronted the hostess told her, well, I think all that food allergy stuff is in your head and I wanted to prove it to you.
Oh my goodness.
That's terrible.
So some people just don't, even if they're skeptical, they might not, if you're in a busy restaurant where somebody's very busy and they run back and they say, okay, I'll ask the chef. And they run back and they say, hey, does such and such have whatchamacallit in it? And the chef is really busy. He says no. But do they really take the time and the care to really think about what's in there?
It kind of seems a little restrictive, though, if you have a food allergy in terms of eating out. You know, there's almost no safe zone, because you can even argue a dessert might have, something in it, depending on how it's prepared or where it's prepared within the kitchen. There may be some crossover. So I think that seems a little difficult to navigate socially if you really have a serious allergy.
The values of here, they have something about dining out. So it just helps. It tells you reading food labels, dining out in restaurants, ask around. Your allergist and other individuals may have a restaurant to recommend.
Lift that up and show, show everybody, show that what it looks like.
And to some extent, the beauty of living in Los Angeles, if you do notice, some restaurants do have listed on their menu what it contains. This dish does contain certain milk products, certain gluten, of course, another whole story, and nuts. So I think being in the big city kind of helps somewhat.
Okay, so anyway, this is food allergy research and education, and I think they're very helpful for people with allergies.
It sounds like it. So this is a little related, but not. I know it's a little different, but what about the people who have gluten sensitivities? That's such a spectrum, it seems. And do you have a sense of what the source of that is? Again, it didn't seem like people had gluten sensitivities, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. I can't, I ask my mother, my grandparents, like, did you know anybody that had a gluten sensitivity? And they're like, no, we all ate that. And now it's like everybody has it. So is it that the gluten has evolved somehow? Is it, GMOs or the way it's been grown or the soil? Or do you have a sense of what's going on with gluten?
Well, for a long period of time, there's been knowledge about celiac disease.
Exactly.
And, there's specific testing that can be done for that. But it seems to be also now that even though people don't test positive for celiac disease, they also feel a lot better when they don't eat gluten or bread. And perhaps that's, I don't know, do you know why that would be?
Well, I think in terms of the modern world, and with regards to diet, and, well, things come and go, so there's a certain fad element to it.
A fad allergy.
Also,
the new fad is gluten. Okay.
If your diet is imbalanced, it should be fairly balanced, protein, fat, carbohydrates. But if you're overloading yourself in carbohydrates, it's not necessarily the gluten itself, but of course, gluten is a part of most of those products. People may associate that the gluten's a problem.
Okay.
I think it's very, very important, again, to go through kind of the three aspects here. Gluten allergy, because there are people who are allergic to gluten.
Is that celiac disease?
No, it is not.
Okay.
It is, as Dr. Johnson stated, they have an allergy cell that will react with the gluten, cause the histamine, the itching, the hives, the swelling, the GI symptoms. That's a true allergy, and that's what we are directly testing for most of the time.
Okay.
Then you may have someone who is gluten or wheat, oat intolerant, or has some type of hypersensitivity, or they're not able to digest it for whatever reason that's not a significant pathology, versus a celiac disease, which is a very specific immunological problem that will happen with regards to gut damage.
So tell us about that a little bit, because some people are talking about celiac disease and the impact that it's having on them. I had somebody in my family who, it was associated with some skin issues and growth difficulties, all of that. So tell us about celiac disease.
Well, really it's an autoimmune phenomena. And the gluten kind of brings on this immunological response. There are other immunological kind of responses that are not through the IgE allergy cell.
Okay.
And this can cause disturbance in the gut. It can cause gut damage. But around that, there are other problems that relate to these other things, joints, skin, in an autoimmune kind of fashion. And it's kind of important to find out if you have that particular disease. Most of the people who say they have gluten problems do not have celiac. Do you feel pretty?
No, they usually
They do not, because
No.
it's a fairly
But I know if somebody
common.
tells me that they feel so much better now that they stopped eating bread, I'm not going to argue with them.
Right.
You know?
Just don't eat it.
But it was a sensitivity, maybe. You know, it
Yes.
wasn't
Right.
like the
Yes.
true
It wasn't the
celiac
true
I will
disease.
go
It
ahead
wasn't
and
the
test
true
them
allergy.
for celiac and for allergy.
Right.
And if those are both normal, I don't tell them go ahead and eat it if it made them feel bad.
Right.
You know, there's just some things we don't know in medicine.
Right.
Right.
You know?
But at the same time, I don't, and we might have you might not say don't eat it, but if they have put themselves into such a life quality situation
Yeah.
and familial social situation, and they don't have gluten allergy, and they don't have celiac disease,
Right.
you know, now they're going through, and their quality of life now is being impacted, I would talk with them with regards of not having these significant type of either allergy or disease, and they may be intolerant. Maybe they can eat a little less of it if they happen to go over someone's house or they get into a
Okay.
bind. They don't say,
Okay.
well, I can't go because I can't eat gluten, and you guys always go somewhere and they don't have. It's hard to imagine now because you can get gluten free almost anywhere.
Which is nice because I think
Yeah.
there was
You
a
can go
time where you
now.
couldn't find anything,
Right.
right? You go to a restaurant, you couldn't get
Right.
gluten-free food, and
Right.
then, you know, again, this family member, we had a big kind of reunion around another family member who had a renal cancer,
Right.
and so we had this big dinner at a restaurant, and there was a whole portion of the menu that was gluten-free. I was so surprised, but also delighted, you know, because it gave those people an opportunity, you know,
Right.
to eat out with everybody else.
Yeah.
One thing we've talked about severe allergies.
Yeah.
And sometimes people have just mild allergies.
Yeah.
Maybe they get some eczema, maybe they get, some seborrhea.
Right.
And some people find that they can eat, if they eat things 3 times a week instead of every day, they do fine.
Right.
Or if it's baked, let's say they can eat baked eggs and baked goods because the protein is denatured,
That's
but they can't
Oh.
eat an actual egg.
Right.
So it varies. There's a spectrum of severity of food allergies.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So, you know, one thing I'm curious about is what made the two of you interested in being an allergist. I mean, it's not the most common type of physician we hear about. And then just, you know, the few moments that we have left, tell me a little bit about what brought you into allergy and immunology.
Okay, well, I like allergy because you can see patients of all ages, adults and children. You get to follow people over a period of time and you get to know them. And we have a lot of tools now that we can use to make people feel better with allergies, asthma, hives. There's a lot of things we can do for people now.
Very nice. What about you, Dr. Staveren?
Well, when I was actually in med school, that's where it triggered my interest because allergy immunology was a new, exciting field.
Nice.
And I think most of us, Dr. Johnson around my time, it was just so fascinating. And now we're finding that really immunology kind of is at the core of almost every
Everything.
specialty.
Cancer, everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
So inflammation. So I actually thought about being a PhD at one point in time,
But allergy won the day.
allergy won the day.
So we are fortunate that happened. We have 2 excellent guests today who really taught us a lot about the difference between sensitivities and allergies. I invite you to go online and find resources to help you and your family. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.